right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rami, and there is no better way to really introduce everyone apart from a 30-second elevator pitch. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to start with myself. Again, to repeat, my name is Rami Ayash. I'm an international student from Egypt studying computer science at Queen's. I'm going to my 4th year. I'm currently doing my last month of a 16-month internship at RBC Capital Markets, where I work in the derivatives regulatory reporting team as a business/technical systems analyst. I really love my job because it allows me to expand both my technical and business skills. And I also love to mention the fact that the Maple Leafs are going to win the cup this year. All right.
Okay.
Handing it off, Tim.
All right, guys. Nice to meet some of you earlier today. My name is Shivdeep Pal. I'm heading into my last year at the Telford School of Management. If you guys have never heard of it, I don't blame you. It's at the University of Ottawa. So I'm currently on the product pricing as well as strategy team at TMX. And aside from school and work, I'm a big basketball fan and I'm a big music guy. I was able to check out Oshiega this past weekend. It was a great time.
Hi, so my name's Tim. I work at Insurance at Aviva. I'm currently an accounting student studying at York University, and I'm looking to pursue a career in either auditing or tax in the future. I found my experience at Aviva to be both refreshing and rewarding, and I look forward to sharing my knowledge with the rest of you.
Hey guys, I'm Chris. I'm a third-year computer science student from Ryerson University. I work at CIBC in information security or cybersecurity. Love working at CIBC. It's been a really great experience for me. And fun fact about myself, I used to play the jazz flute before it was a meme from Will Ferrell. So yeah, if you want to hear some good Dizzy Gillespie, I can play it up. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I just finished my 3rd year at the University of Toronto doing computer science with a focus in artificial intelligence. My internship is at Intact Insurance. I'm doing test automation and Java development there. It's 16 months. I just finished my 3rd month, but I really love it so far.
All right, hi everyone, my name is Kate. I am currently studying at Ivy in Western, so I'm part of the business program as well as getting a Bachelor of Medical Science at the same time. In terms of internships, I worked last summer at Scotiabank for investment banking, and I'm currently working at OMERS with their private equity team. A little bit about myself besides work. Really love to cook, love to travel, so if anyone wants to talk about traveling after, happy to do that as well. And playing sports. So I used to play competitive soccer and I play volleyball.
All right, awesome. Well, these are excellent elevator pitches. We would have been at the top of the CN Tower right now if this was a measure. All right, heading to the first category, which is personal growth. So what were your goals for your internship and what steps did you take to achieve them? We're going to hear from Joanne first.
When I was looking for an internship, I really focused on finding a place with a great culture. So I interviewed everywhere just for the technical experience, and then when I went into Intact, it wasn't even a position I wanted, but I was so blown away by my boss, my hiring manager. He gave me a tour, I met a few people, and he was really great. He explained the culture there and how they're starting initiatives to be more inclusive, and yeah, I took the job right away. So I think I don't know if you can expect that much out of a position as an internship, but definitely look for a company that you really like is important.
All right, awesome. Shiv, we're going to hear from you next.
Sure. So I think coming into my internship here at TMX, some of the goals that I had kind of set out were, first, I really wanted to fundamentally understand the business and see what TMX was all about. Secondly, I wanted to really network within the company and build a strong network by meeting different people in different teams. And lastly, I was coming in from my previous internship in Treasury to really no experience in product. So I really wanted to understand, if I really like the product scene and product management, or is this something that's not for me? So in order to kind of achieve my first 2 goals, I think the main thing that I did was really meet different people in different teams and see what they were working on to properly, fundamentally understand how they were contributing to TMX and what TMX was all about. And lastly, in terms of learning more about the product scene, I try to get involved as much as I possibly can with my team. I talked myself into some of the projects that I wouldn't have gotten if I didn't request for it. So I think those were kind of the ways where I looked to properly achieve some of the goals that I had set out initially.
Awesome. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Kate.
All right, so for my internship, there are a couple of specific sort of technical things that I really wanted to have exposure to. So the way that I made sure about that is very early on in my internship, I spoke with my managers and the people that I was working with, and I let them know that these were things I was interested in trying out. And sort of as opportunities came up during the summer, they would come back to me and say, hey, I know you really wanted to touch on this. Why don't we sit down for 10 minutes and let's talk about it? So that was the first thing I really wanted to do, was very specific technical things that I won't bore you with. The second component is I wanted to be able to work with everyone on my team. I wanted that opportunity to start seeing different work styles. So what I wanted to do was make sure I was very proactive in trying to find work and figuring out which projects to work on, and making sure that I did approach everyone within the office to ask them if they needed help and there's something that I could work with them to start to develop those skills, because everyone has a slightly different style. So I think it's really useful to try and get that diversity of work experience. So those are two of my main goals.
Awesome. Now, as a follow-up question to that, so did your current experience or previous experience change any of the goals that you've set for yourselves? And we're going to start this time with Shiv.
Sure. So like I had mentioned, coming into this internship on the product scene, I didn't really have much previous product experience or experience related to strategy on the product side. So coming in and getting involved in different projects and doing a lot of the work, I realized that this is something that's pretty interesting and something that I wanted to kind of continue learning more about, because I could maybe see it. I could see myself doing something like this post grad. So I really took it upon myself and set a goal to reach out to some of the other product teams, learn what they were doing, and also kind of talk to people not only internally but externally in the product scene as well, to kind of get a different perspective and see what really is out there, and if it does make sense for me to do something like this after graduation.
All right, awesome. Christopher?
Yeah, so for me, last summer, I came into CIBC as a front-end developer. Of course, being in computer science was a great fit. But then shortly after, I was selected to be part of a pilot project called SWAT. At RBC, they have a very similar project called Amplify. Essentially, you picked top students to work on a number of recommendations on how to make the bank of the future. So I came in very introverted, don't really talk to people, maybe a little different than I am now, of course. And that changed my short-term goals. I had to learn very quickly how to work well within a team, create a deck, and then at the end of that, I had to present a pitch to the CEO and a number of executives on how to make CIBC the bank of the future and work on some pretty complex problems. So short term, I was like, great, I got to change my entire skill set here very, very quickly. Long term, as part of that, I got to tour so many different parts of the bank. I got to work with some cybersecurity people, which is where I'm currently working today, and kind of fell in love with the impact that they can have with our clients, and find the work very fun and enjoyable. So that was a great stepping stone long term to changing my goal. I thought I was going to be a web developer long term, and now I see my future in cybersecurity.
All right, awesome. And how would you say this has helped you build self-confidence during your internship, Chris?
Yeah, so I think first things first, don't be afraid to be yourself. I've come to realize with being in SWAT and seeing so many different areas of banks, seeing executives, just be yourself. Like, I'm very energetic as an individual, which is, you can probably tell. So as long as you're yourself and you're comfortable being yourself, I think people are a lot more receptive. Try to stay as engaged as possible and as passionate as you can with your work, and just try to make friends within your department. And I think that'll go a really long way for building your self-confidence within your team.
All right, awesome. And Joanne, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chris. Being yourself is enormous, and not just that, but networking within your department. But on top of that, when I started, I asked so many questions, but not just questions that I wanted yes or no answers to. I wanted resources so I could teach myself, so that I could talk to people and know what I was talking about, and that's been really huge. And on top of that, saying yes to every opportunity. People will come to you and say, will you do this? And I almost find it impossible to say no, just because I'm here for the opportunity. So even if it's out of your comfort zone, you have to take the opportunities.
All right, awesome. Now we have a tough question coming up, but don't worry, we're all friends, unless you cheer for the Habs, but I want to pick on people. Anyway, so what has been the toughest challenge during your internship, and how did you recover? And we're going to pick it up from where we left with Joanne.
This one is something that's really common, I think, in test automation. There's a bit of a barrier between manual testers and automated testers that we're having a really hard time overcoming. It's been like their area of expertise for as long as they can remember, and now we're the new kids in town telling them how to do their job. So there is a bit of a barrier there. But what we're trying to do is just make meetings, find ways that we can help them, always keep up a friendly rapport with them, moving forward, developing frameworks that are more inclusive to them. It's something that, it's going to be a lot of communication is the only way to solve that. And it's going better now. A little bit.
All right, glad to hear so. And then hearing next from Shiv.
Sure. So I think coming in, I think the biggest challenge I'd say I had was there was a steep learning curve in terms of getting up to par with all the different products that we had. There was just so many acronyms and so many different variables going into pricing and whatnot. And I think that was kind of the main challenge. I remember my manager telling me, he's like, even by the end of the year, 4 months here, you probably won't understand half the stuff that's going on. And like, it's to an extent true. But I think, and the main way how I kind of overcame that obstacle was just asking a lot of questions. I would try to learn everything myself first, and then whenever I had questions, I just bring it up to him and ask away. So I think that was kind of the main way I was able to kind of really hop over that obstacle.
Awesome, and also want to hear from Chris.
Yeah, so as you heard last summer, I was in web development and now I'm in security, and I came in with zero knowledge. I was lucky enough that they said, hey, we'll take a chance on this guy. But coming in, dealing with a lot of the security that we have at the bank, it's very important, right? So for me, that has been my biggest challenge, coming in with no knowledge, using a ton of acronyms. You guys probably see it in your jobs that you have no idea what they mean when you first hear them, and you kind of have to ask the stupid questions like, yeah, what does that mean? And then they're all giving you the looks, well, of course, how do you not know what it means? So for me, it is not being afraid of looking like a fool sometimes, asking the dumb questions just to make sure I get up to speed, putting in a couple of extra hours just to make sure that I'm up to par with our systems and how everything's laid out. And for me, my biggest thing that I did is I wrote actually a guide of how to do my job and engaged some other people around me to help me do that. So for me, if that was my biggest thing, because I didn't know how to do my job, coming in, which is why they should not have hired me. But if you go with the intention of taking it as a positive note, I'll build a guide on how to do this job, then you'll become an expert at doing that. So if you're facing the same kind of problems, then maybe that's a little tip for you guys as well.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Chris. So we're going to move on to the next section of questions that we have, which is about managing relationships. And let's start with a really important relationship that everybody has at work, which is your relationship with your manager. Now, often, both our and our manager schedules are pretty tight. So how do you guys find time to speak to your manager? And we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so maybe get a show of hands. Who here has Outlook at their work? Yes, everybody in the room pretty much. Awesome. That means you can creep your manager's schedule, guys. How great is that? No rah-rahs? Come on. No, so you can see everything that your manager's going to have, right, in their schedule. So I take that to my advantage. I look ahead of time, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, booking midpoint meetings, things like that, to try and get their feedback. I have a team lead on top of my manager, so I'm always trying to engage them as well, or other team members, even if my manager's not available. And if your manager's not available, we have IM, we have email. People hate to have meetings anyways, so if you send them an email, they can answer it in their own time, and they can get back to you and give you maybe a little more thoughtful answer than that when you first meet them for an in-person meeting. And for me, I know my manager, I'm usually the first one in the office. My manager's the second person in, so I'll try and nab them right before they even get to their computer if it's something really urgent. I'm sure he doesn't like it that much, but for me, it makes me feel better about what I'm doing, so yeah.
All right, awesome. And then Joanne, how do you find time to talk to your manager?
For me, it's been really easy. They have bi-weekly meetings with both my team lead and my managers, so anytime I need a question, not even in those meetings, but in general, I can go to them anytime I want. I know where their desks are, they don't mind. And we also have daily stand-ups, so it's really been very simple for me to do that. But advice as far as that goes would definitely be to try to answer the question yourself, maybe ask other people that have more time first, and then go to them for clarification, or if you can't solve it on your own. And that's worked really well for me. And not only do they think that you respect their time, but they think you know what you're talking about, which is nice.
All right, awesome. And Kate?
Yeah, so just to add on, one thing I would say is get to know your manager's style. Some people like to be approached in a different way. In general, Outlook is incredibly helpful. So using that, putting actually an event in their calendar, and they're like, oh, I have to go talk to Kate. That actually triggers it, and letting them know maybe in advance what you actually want to talk about. So not just saying, hey, can we talk? Give them something that you want to actually achieve in that meeting so they know, and it helps them gauge sort of how long it might take, the topics that they might want to be able to cover. Those are really helpful things to do. The other thing I would say is if you have asked your manager to talk about something, you're looking for guidance, whatever it is, and even if you've sent that calendar invite and it's in their schedule, be ready to talk about it like from the second that you've asked them. Because one, they could come back and be like, let's talk right now. Or two, they could plan something for maybe like next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. But then something changes and they just swing by your desk and they're like, hey, can you talk now? And you're like, oh, I wasn't ready to talk until Tuesday at 4. Like, be ready to talk because they're pretty busy, and when things come up for them and they have time, they want to use it. They want to maximize, I guess, their usefulness, and if they have free time, they will come to you. So just be ready to talk if you ask for help.
All right, awesome. Now, I'm not really supposed to speak a lot about myself. However, whenever I'm looking for more challenging tasks from my manager, which, by the way, doesn't happen quite often at RBC CM, just a heads up, I approach her by saying, hey, let's go grab breakfast. And I know she really likes avocado toast. It puts her in a good mood. So, you know, we go grab breakfast, and that's when I come up and say, hey, for the past week or two, I've been working on X, Y, and Z initiatives. You know, I think they've been great. However, I feel that my efforts can be put elsewhere because I feel I can be more productive in this or that area. And as soon as I, you know, like voice my concerns, usually like she takes actions upon it. I say, okay, like what would you like to do? I'll try my best to get you on that as quickly as possible. One really important note that my manager has given me before is that if you spend 5 days at work feeling that you are not happy or whatever you're doing is not really a learning, capability. It's not a learning possibility. Then make sure you go and speak to your manager as fast as possible and voice that concern because they can't figure that out on their own. But that's my experience. Tim, what about you? How do you?
Yes, I haven't really talked to you guys, so it'll be my first time talking. So yeah, I had multiple times during my tenure as an intern at Aviva to ask about more difficult tasks. Just in the beginning, my manager didn't really, I don't know if she thought I couldn't take too much, but it was more a slower pace. But if you realize that you can take a higher pace, I found I usually take a more methodical approach how to ask. So usually I try to probe if there's any work actually available for you to do. So I usually go to my manager and ask, oh, is there anybody that needs help, or does anyone need any help? So I usually use it as a way to gauge if there's anything to do. And if there is, I usually just go up straight to my manager at my desk, and I usually ask, oh, is there something I can help with? Is there anything at a deeper level? Because I'm picking up things pretty quickly. I also found a lot, if you guys have mid-season reviews or like reviews one-on-ones with your manager, that's like a perfect time to bring it up, that you're picking up things really quickly, and this is an opportunity for you to talk and tell them, oh, I wouldn't mind having harder tasks or more responsibilities, because, and then if your review's going well, you can show that you're really doing what you're doing really well. Just a tip as overall is just that make sure, it's impressive that you can keep taking more tasks on, but make sure that you're able to finish what you can do currently and that you keep that balance.
Very awesome. What about you, Shiv?
Yeah, just to add on to what Rami and Tim said, I think depending on your role, it's really, it's probably a good strategy to kind of, at the beginning of your internship, just set expectations with your manager in terms of what goals and what kind of work you want to exactly be hitting. I think we all know as interns, sometimes the work you do get is not as exciting or not as appealing, but I think it's really nice to do those tasks with the same level of efficiency and excellency that you'd be doing a very difficult task, because it does build that trust with your manager. So in the situation where a task that's a bit more difficult or a bit more important does come up, he knows that you'd be the go-to intern. So I think just building that trust with your manager and being transparent is probably very key in a situation like that. And aside from that, I think you can ask your teammates if you don't have too much going on or you don't have too much on your plate, and you see they're busy, just be like, hey, I see that you're busy. Like, is there something you need a hand with or anything of that sort? And I think that's the easy way to kind of slip into different projects and get more diverse experience.
Very awesome. Now, Shiv, your teammates and coworkers have responsibilities, but you also have responsibilities.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and then of course they can also be asking you to do stuff for them.
Yeah.
So how do you manage their tasks with your responsibilities?
For sure. So I think in a situation like that, it's pretty important to be vocal, and because as interns, like there's multiple times where there's a lot of different managers having different asks from you. And I think in that sort of situation, one manager could be like, hey, can you finish this for me ASAP? And you could be working on something from a different manager who's like, hey, can you finish this for me ASAP? So in a situation like that, I think it's very important to be vocal and kind of showcase what your true capacity is of what you're capable of finishing up in that certain time frame. Obviously, if it's doable, then go for it. Aside from that, I think prioritization is key. A nice thing I like to do every morning is I come to work, I just make a quick list of things I want to accomplish during the day and allocate time to that accordingly, and that I find is very effective to kind of keep me in order and keep me in check in terms of what I need to be finishing during that day, and kind of keeps my mind on the right path.
All right, awesome. What about you, Kate? How do you time manage?
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is be honest with yourself and the people you're working with. There are going to be times where you probably have too much work to do and you're not going to be able to take more work on. It's really hard as an intern, I think, to get to the point where you're comfortable actually saying, hey, you know what, I'm not able to do that. It's really hard the first time that someone asks you to do something, you're like, I actually can't. So I think the way to approach something like that is, one, be really clear about what they're asking you to do, what the exact task is, and what their expectation is for that task. Because some people could be like, hey, can you go find this? And they mean go spend 20 minutes and look into it, or they could mean go spend 5 hours and look into it. So be clear on what they're asking and when they want it done. So people have different definitions of ASAP or soon or like as fast as you can. And sometimes that means they actually need it within the next hour, and that could also mean they would like it by tomorrow at noon. So be clear when you're getting a task. Make sure you know, one, what the task actually is. It sounds kind of silly to say that, but make sure you're very clear on what the objective of that task is. And then two, make sure you know when it is, and then that's the time where you're going to make that judgment call and say, hey, I can help you, or I can't help you. Or you might say, hey, I can help you, but I have something I need to do by 6 o'clock tonight, so I'll come find you at 6 and we'll figure out how we can both get this done together. So just be honest.
All right, thanks, Kate. Appreciate that. Now, we all know that relationships require some work. And Joanne, how do you build relationships around your team?
It's been a little bit of a struggle. We're pretty new on my team, so we kind of had to scrape out a niche on the team where we fit. We kind of are defining our role on the team. The only thing that helps really is keeping up conversation a lot, communication between all of the team members that I have to work with, and going to my bosses and taking the initiative to say, like, I can do this. I think it's a good idea if this is maybe more what my role is.
All right, excellent. I feel that we can all attest to that. However, we're moving on to a new segment of questions, which is about feedback and questions. That pun was intended. So let's talk about feedback and asking questions. Do you believe asking questions has been an important component of your early professional success? Why or why not? And we're going to start again with Joanne.
Yeah, like I said before, absolutely the biggest. I would say it's definitely the most important in the start of an internship. But you gotta, I think, realize when you can go to Google instead of asking somebody. Like he said, with all the acronyms, going into insurance, I had no idea what I was looking at. I've never bought insurance in my life, so I was drowning. So Google was my best friend. And I know people got sick of me being like, what does this mean? What does that mean? So I just started Googling everything, and it was great. But asking them for like a resource, like I got a lot more than I know that the intern before me got, just by going on my way to find the people that will give me the resources. So.
All right, awesome. Shiv, you're next.
Sure, I completely agree with Joanne. I think just trying things for yourself first and try to figure it out yourself is probably the best way to go. And after you completely exhausted that, going and asking questions, I think it's definitely very important. Generally speaking, I think coming into internships, you're probably working with managers or like MDs who've been in the industry for probably as long as you've been alive. So I think it's a really good resource to really pick their brains, gain some wisdom and knowledge that kind of brings you up to par with like the business itself, and just sets you apart and makes you a bit more competitive.
Right, awesome. And then Tim?
So I agree with both of them. I feel like I'm being a push here, but for me personally, I'm in insurance, and when I first applied, I had knew nothing about insurance, about anything about the SABs, which is the statutory guidelines we follow when we do adjusting of claims and stuff like that. So there's a lot of acronyms, as people said, I didn't understand. So I found like in the beginning, especially when you're learning the ropes of a new job, asking questions is critical. If you don't ask questions, later down the road, it might be under misunderstanding, and you might misapply something because of the fact you didn't ask a question previously, right? So I find asking questions, especially in the beginning, is critical. Later on, as you start getting more accustomed to your job and become more used to the software available to you, you can start asking questions around your peers and just Google, as people said. But I find in the beginning, especially in an industry you're new with, asking questions, especially to your manager, is critical.
Yeah, awesome. And just to add to that, guys, one thing that has really helped me with my internship is asking structured questions to the detail. For example, today I got an email saying, hey, this thing won't work. And I was like, okay, like when did you try it out? What has been the result? What did you do exactly? Can you list out the steps? So it would really help the other person that you're trying to contact to list out what you've done, what you're trying to achieve, and what has been your process ongoing in there. Awesome. So what are some questions that you feel other students should be asking more frequently? That's a great question, and we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so I think, Shiv kind of alluded to it earlier. More for onboarding, I would say. You'll have that first meeting with your team leader, your manager. Really good to set expectations ahead of time. So one of the first things I asked is, what are one or two measurable objectives you want me to achieve within my term? That to me has been really good because I can actually measure my success. Again, coming in, very new to the field, and that gave me a structured plan of like what I can achieve within my term and what specific skills I need to brush up on and learn more on. As well, you need to ask yourself the question, what do you want to achieve? I think we all get these jobs and we start and we're like, yes, I have a job and it's going to look great on a resume, it's going to be awesome on LinkedIn, and it's going to help me get to wherever I want to go in the future. But what do I actually want to achieve? Where do I want to go? And if where I want to go, let's say I'm in security now, my goal, my life goal is to be in capital markets. I want to be the guy on Wolf on Wall Street, right? How does my term here help me get to there? And if it's something not directly within my team, then I can take notes of things I can do within my term to get me closer, whether it's meeting with people in capital markets, seeing if I can get a tour. I think that's a really good place to start.
Fun fact, The Wolf of Wall Street was filmed in the RBC Capital Markets trade floor in New York. Anyhow, moving on to Kate, what are some questions that you feel students should be asking more frequently?
Yeah, so in general, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. Probably going to echo what you've just heard mostly, but a lot of interns sometimes are afraid to go and ask their manager or someone above them, a question because you're afraid of maybe coming off as you don't know what you're doing or you're not sure how to do your job, but definitely don't be afraid, one, to just go and ask those questions. Google, very useful. Would recommend checking Google out first if it's something that you think it can answer, and it's pretty good most of the time. But if you can't find the answer, go talk to people. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, I don't know what's going on. It's okay that you don't know everything. They're not expecting you to know 100% of your job. It's all right. In terms of specific questions, I think one note would be, Joanne brought it up earlier, is really looking for resources. There's always resources that people can bring up and they'll tell you, and sometimes it's, hey, you should go, read this article or check out this podcast. So the people you work with, they have so much knowledge, so go and talk to them, see what they have to say, see what resources they would recommend, and ask them for sort of how they would approach taking your next few weeks or months of your internship.
All right, awesome. And then we're just going to take one last question for Tim. Have you ever thought about getting feedback, and do you think it has been an important contributor to your success?
I think it's actually critical to what I'm doing. So a lot of mine is a huge process, a huge lengthy process when I'm dealing with a claim and helping others with it. So how I see it is feedback is a way of facilitating or finding an easy answer from people. That's how I see it. Because when you literally go for feedback, you're asking for help. Well, not really help, but you're asking for an easier method or way of innovating your process. So I find a lot of times when I go up for feedback, it's pretty much a euphemism for saying, oh, is there a way I can help innovate this process or do this in a simpler manner to facilitate an easier task? I also think when you take feedback, there's an art to it. Not everyone can take criticism really well. And I find that people who can absorb criticism, especially later in life, because you're not perfect in everything you do, you're going to make mistakes. I find the art of criticism is crucial to what you do, especially if you want to get farther in life, because you need to learn from people who have wealth of experience, especially your managers who know a lot. And taking that criticism and understanding how to incorporate back into what you need to do is crucial.
All right, awesome. Then we're moving on to the next topic, which is growing your network. One of the great ways I've found to grow my network is use internal tools that my company has made available for us to utilize to go out and reach out to people. Those people who've signed up for these networking tools literally are there because they do want to network with people who are co-ops, interns, new grads. They do want to know what's going on in our heads. That's one really great way to reach out for people. We use 10,000 coffees at RBC. I'm pretty sure it's spread out in a lot of other companies. And then, of course, another tip that I have is, don't afraid to be yourself. And if you're going out, for a coffee with someone, make sure you're also interested in who they are as a person, not only in their job. Today, for example, I went out with a coffee with a guy. I wasn't really aiming to get a job. I just thought he was a really cool person. It was really beneficial for both of our networks to have each other. So, what activities or steps have you guys done to grow your professional network within your organization? And we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so similar to what you said, Remy, go to all the events, every single one. For me, the biggest thing is to realize that you want to make friendships, right? So being able to go out and talk to a number of individuals, feeling free to just reach out to anybody. We're all people here, right? Whether it's a team lead in an area you're interested in, or whether it's connecting with HR, or whoever it is, feel free to just reach out anywhere. And I think you kind of touched on a really good point. It's important, I feel like, not to treat people like the relationship is transactional, in a sense. I think that's really important for actually building a good, strong network. Is I don't look at it as networks. I look at it as gaining more friends within the organization. And if you don't treat it as transactional, you don't treat them as an ends to a means to get to wherever you're going next, and you're just generally interested in what they're doing and their area, and being willing to be open to them and their wealth of knowledge, then that, of course, it goes a very long way. And just being yourself, being comfortable with them, for sure.
Right, awesome. How about yourself, Shiv?
Well, I think I completely agree with these two. I think any networking event you're going to, whether it's a coffee chat or just any engagement, I think you want to be genuinely interested in the person you're talking to. And I think a great book, I don't know if you guys have read it, or I think you guys should all read, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's an amazing book on how to build the skills revolving around networking. Aside from that, I think just going to, if it's within your company, just going to all inter-company events that would allow you to meet different people and really network. I think it's crucial. For me personally, I'm here at TMX, so we have market opens and closes, and we have different companies come in, and all sorts of different people, like investors, traders, and whatnot. So I think it's always a good opportunity for me to just go there, speak to these people, learn more about what they do. I think just the biggest thing is just being there. Like once you get yourself there, you're bound to meet cool people. So I think just don't overthink it. Just go, and good things will happen, I think.
Very awesome. Now, of course, a lot of us have people to look up to, also known as mentors. So my next question is, what mentors have supported you through your professional development, and how have you approached them? And we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so a couple current mentors I have is Eric Fry and Naomi Ali Kote. Eric was my team lead in SWAT last year, and I learned a lot from him specifically on public speaking and how to present myself and kind of build my personal brand. And from Naomi, I learned a lot of personal growth and as well business acumen. That coming from computer science is something I don't naturally learn. I'm programming on a computer, not so much realizing the business aspect of what I'm doing. I think, how have I approached getting those mentors? I think I just asked them. A better example would be a previous mentor I had until he moved countries was a gentleman named Yuha. I later went on to work for him. Does anybody know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? Raise your hands. 2 people, great. So Gary Vaynerchuk is an entrepreneur. He has a very famous YouTube channel, and he's written a couple books. One I would highly recommend you guys check out is Jab, 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 Right Hook. I saw this guy as somebody I really looked up to. He started his own business, and they'd made just under $500,000 in sales. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I'm like, I gotta learn from this guy. This is gonna be great. So I read this book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. The idea, the synopsis of it is add value, add value, add value, ask, okay? So I looked at it as, what can I do to add value to him in his personal life, in his business, and then maybe I can ask him for advice and build a really good relationship with him. Maybe I can ask him for an introduction to different areas that I might want to go work So that to me I think is a really big tip. If you have a chance to go read a book, I would highly recommend that, especially if you're looking for a mentor.
All right, what about you, Joanne? How did you approach your mentors?
I definitely haven't had as much success as Chris. I don't have 3 really cool mentors. But there is my old hiring manager. He moved on to recruiting, and so he's come to me a few times with questions about what I'd be interested in coming back to the company. And he's been really great. I told him about an interest I had in the AI lab upstairs, and he hooked me up with the manager. Next day I had coffee, and that guy's been really helpful, the AI manager. So that was an amazing connection that he helped me make. Other than that, I think building on what they said with finding people that you're genuinely interested in, finding people that share your interests, and just don't be afraid to ask them for advice and direction. And most people are really, really open to helping you network, I've found. So.
Great, awesome. How about yourself, Kate?
Yeah, pretty much to echo what everyone else has said. I've had both formal mentors that have been sort of established through my organization and ones that are also informal. Would strongly recommend you go and try and find your own sort of informal mentors. Really just talk to people, find someone that you're interested in, someone you mesh with that you can actually see yourself having a more personal relationship with. And honestly, just ask them to get coffee or ask them to, go for a walk or go for lunch, whatever it is. Just start trying to break that ice and start getting to know them a bit better, because they're a great resource and people are really willing to help you if you take the time to show you're interested and ask.
All right, awesome. And then our final question is, how have you approached internal networking with coworkers from different teams or departments? And has this helped you in your day-to-day work, Shiv?
Sure. I think how I've approached this is, I think everyone's company has like an internal database. So browsing through it, if I sometimes find someone who I think is doing something very interesting, I just shoot them a message, an email, introduce myself, saying, hey, this is my name. I'd like to really learn more about what you're doing. And usually we just grab a quick coffee, and I've done that on multiple occasions. And I think it's really helped throughout some of the work I've been doing, because there's been occasions where something has come up and I've needed something that team has, and then I always know, okay, I talked to this person, this is probably my first point of contact, so I just hit them up, and they could direct me to someone else who maybe has the information I need. So I think that's kind of been my approach, and I've been successful with it so far.
All right, awesome. Now moving on to the next topic, which is exit strategy. I believe it's a really important topic given that a lot of us are in their last month of their internships right now. So my question is, how have you communicated your interest in future opportunities to your manager or HR? And let's start with Chris and Kate, whose internship both finished at the end of the month. Chris?
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky at CIBC. We have a really good HR team. I work with an amazing woman named Victoria. And right as I got onboarded, I saw her energy and was like, I want to keep in touch. I set a monthly meeting all through my term. So I saw her once a month just as like a pulse check and say, hey, this is how I'm doing, and things are going really great. Or specifically last year, hey, things are going great, but I think there's this other area I'd like to check out. And so at that moment in time last year, she connected me with a number of individuals who were team leads to get coffee, and she did the intro, and then it was up to me to go from there. So if you do have HR at your work or a campus team, I highly encourage you guys to check them out. I'm sure they want to keep all the talented millennials I see here within their organizations, so I'm sure they're more than willing to help. So yeah, that's kind of been my biggest thing as well with my manager, having midpoints and finals and letting them know personally where I am and not being afraid to share any struggles or difficulties I've had. And kind of if I want to stay in the current position, how I can leverage that to stay and continue to come back.
Okay, awesome. Kate?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is similar along those lines would be, first off, talk to both HR and your managers. They both have different roles to play, and they both will be a part of future opportunities in different ways. So be open to talking to both parties. I think when it comes to thinking about what you want to do in the future, having those mentors that we just spoke about are really useful. So leverage mentors that you have, people that you've talked to that you're comfortable with. Definitely try and reach out and talk to them as much as you can. And not necessarily something you have to do as an action, but every day when you show up to work and you're genuinely interested in what you're doing and you show that you want to be there and that this is a job that you're enjoying, that speaks a lot to to what they're going to pick up on, because if you show up and you want to be there, your manager is going to notice that, and that is something that they'll keep in mind moving forward is, hey, one, they did a great job, two, they wanted to be here, and showing your interest to stay on is something that's really important to do every day that you show up to work.
Now, sometimes people, they get put in roles which doesn't really align with their like future goals or what they want to do at work. Now, what do you guys think would be a good way to ask HR or your manager for a differential once you come back next September? So we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned it quite a few times now. Last year, starting as a web developer and going to where I was going to go in security, it was really important for me to talk to my manager, stay very positive, of course, with them. The last thing you want to do is burn a bridge when you're having this sort of conversation. It's not a good fit for you. So for me, I took it as, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here. And my time has been great, and the team I'd work with had been so good, so I felt somewhat guilty. But you need to realize, that's where you want to go. So don't feel too guilty to have this honest conversation with them. Don't feel too guilty for the people around you, and try to take it as a positive note. I've learned so much here that I think I am good enough to move on to another opportunity within the organization. And if you know anybody, I'd love to talk to them. And coffee tours, as I've kind of mentioned, seeing what that kind of nucleus of the team is like, and how their culture is, and getting kind of accustomed to that before you even start that next year, hopefully, is a good way to go about it.
Right, awesome, thanks, Chris. And then final question would be asking for recommendations before you leave. Now, a really helpful way that I found was if you guys use LinkedIn, you can request for recommendations from your managers or people that you've worked with at work. Now, I want to hear more about, what do you guys do in terms of an exit strategies? Do you send out thank you letters, goodbye emails, or what is your strategy in terms of asking for recommendations? We're going to hear from Kate.
Yeah, so in terms of exit strategies, there are 3 things that I would generally recommend doing. For people that you sort of see as mentors that you have a pretty close connection with, I generally ask if they're willing to get coffee or lunch, and for once take them out instead of, most of the time when you go for coffees, they offer to pay. So it's kind of nice to offer to take them out as a way to say thank you and actually tell them in person, give them real reasons why they were useful and how they helped guide you over your course of your internship, and have that conversation person to person. Second thing is it's really useful to send sort of a goodbye email, let people know that you really enjoyed your experience, and give them sort of a contact that they can keep in touch with. So either school email or another email address that they can reach you at, because I've had experiences where people might have left the company that I was working at, but because they had my email, they let me know, and they said, hey, this is my new email to keep in touch with. So it's useful both ways for them to know how they can reach you. And then the third piece would be actually follow up. If you're back in town and you really got along with people that you worked with and you want to see them again, just mention it, let them know. They might be busy, but if you're like, hey, back in town, would be great to grab a coffee, would be great to grab lunch, whatever it is, actually follow up and try and maintain those personal connections, because they're really useful, in 3 months, 2 months, however long it's been, or they're useful, in 5-10 years. So would definitely recommend actually following up with people that you want to stay in touch with, and try and see them in person if you have that chance.
Right, awesome. And then finally, moving on to the last question topic, which is next steps. Now, what do you do once the internship is over? Kate, can you share with us how did you stay connected to your coworkers and managers to maintain a positive rapport and stay informed of potential opportunities?
Yeah, so in general, I would say try and keep in contact both with HR. If there's someone that you've been speaking to or know pretty well, it's great to keep in touch with them, because they're pretty on the ball about campus recruiting and what's happening moving forward. But sort of as I just mentioned, making sure that you follow up and stay in touch with those people that you did have those connections with. For example, when I finished my internship last summer, and a couple of the guys that I worked with were coming back to school for their next year of recruiting, keeping in touch is just, hey, you're around campus, let's get coffee. So it's really easy to make sure that you have that contact, and trying to follow up with them whenever you have that opportunity. And trying to actually see them. Don't just let it be like, oh, we'll keep in touch. Actually follow through on that, and that's what they're going to remember, and hopefully, they would also like to see you as well. So.
Right, awesome. And then taking a moment to consider what you've learned can be really helpful. How do you reflect on your internship after it has ended to help determine your next steps? And we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, so maybe I'm weird, but I take an achievement journal as I go through of all the awesome things I got to do this summer, whether it's personally or professionally, so that when the summer's done, I can look back at it and be like, wow, I was pretty cool this summer. It was really great. As well, I think it's important when you're leaving and you're reflecting and you're looking forward, I make a contact list, just an Excel spreadsheet of all the amazing people I've met within the organization, their emails, their phone numbers, things that I can do to keep in touch, right? So it's easy, it's there, it's tangible with me that I can take home with me. And then maybe like a fun fact about them, like, you know, Naomi has a kid and she plays tennis. Like, yes, so when I call her next, I can be like, hey Naomi, like, how's your daughter? She's playing tennis, that's so great. Is she like the next, like, Gianni Rochette? Like, come on. Or Bouchard, sorry. So Rochette is figure skating, yeah. So, wrong sport. So that's kind of what I do, and I really take the time to make a positive look back at what I'm doing, and you know, have that tangible thing I can take away to stay in touch.
All right, awesome. And then one question that would be really helpful for all the students here is, what lessons or concepts have you learned from work, and how can you reapply that back at school? Tim, can we hear from you, please?
Okay, so for me personally, I just find the thing I take the most important is be open-minded. I see internship as an opportunity to learn, and it's more of an exploration. A lot of times people do internships and they don't actually go into that field, but they take a lot of different internships at different industries. You can be in the mining industry, comm sci, you could be in insurance, finance, so a whole bunch of industries. So I see being open-minded. When you go back to school, I remember my first year before I took an internship, I was really introverted. I didn't really talk to anyone. I didn't really participate in extracurriculars or clubs or finding any opportunities to network out. But I remember one thing after I took my first year at Aviva, coming back to next school year, being open-minded, seeking those opportunities, be the one that's proactive, look out for those opportunities. You'll find yourself finding a lot of success because it often goes to people who look out for it. So the second thing for me was communication. I realized in the workplace how important communication is. Things break down really easily, especially if communication is not strong, if your verbal communication or written. So one thing I found making group projects a lot easier because often when I was in my first year, I wasn't the one facilitating the discussion. I was the one who was in the back, who was really shy, who didn't really communicate. But now I found myself approaching more the leadership opportunity where I was the one taking a few steps of getting the group together, leading the discussion, and trying to figure out what to do. So I find being open-minded and using your leadership skills, what you fostered at the internship to pull yourself through is really, really crucial.
All right, awesome. And then one last question before we head out to Q&A is for Shiv. How will you share the lessons that you learned from your internship with other students once you go back?
For sure. So I think the primary way is at school we have like different workshops and different events where students are able to just speak about some of their experiences of their past internships. And one of the main clubs that I'm a part of is like the Tougher Student Investment Club, and everyone always talks about their past internships, what they learned, and how that could kind of contribute to the club. So I think that's probably one of the main ways. Aside from that, I'm always open to meeting different students, learning more about what they did, learning more about some of their experiences while also sharing mine. So I think I'm very open in that sense. So I think that's probably some of the primary ways where I look forward to kind of sharing my experiences and what I've learned.
We're going to open up the floor to questions. Feel free to raise your hand and don't be shy.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I was just wondering what steps you guys take to connect with people outside of the workplace, because I know I'm really comfortable with like reaching out and connecting within my workplace, but I've been given a lot of advice to go and reach out and connect with other people outside of my workplace. So what are kind of the steps you do to take that? Is it like LinkedIn or, yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take up this one. So essentially, you can be in a really large organization, and what can really be helpful is if you reach out to your internal network from that organization and say, hey, I'm really interested, for example, in taking up a role in a different organization, let's say telecommunications. Do you happen to know anyone who works at Rogers, Telus, or Bell that you can connect me with? And of course, as you said, LinkedIn is a really good way to reach out. Of course, if you send out a message to whatever you're interested in, make sure that you're reaching out to the correct person, and that if you're reaching out to multiple people, your message is different from person to person, because I do get it sometimes from HR when they say, yeah, like one person sent out 30 messages to 30 different people who all sit next to each other, and they're like, hey, have you checked this out? And they're like, yeah. So of course they don't find it nice. So of course you're reaching out to people, not a computer. Try to make the message personalized and go on from there. Now, would any of you like to add anything to this? No?
For me personally, I found if your school is affiliated, like your post-secondary school is affiliated with wherever you're with, I find using the school as a medium in order to communicate and find extra people is actually really, really easy too. I find a lot of people don't use their school, it's really underutilized, but your school is a huge way to find connections with people, especially if it's affiliated with your company.
All right, awesome.